The store instruction. The register type binary for a store instruction is the same as it is for a load, except that the destination field specifies a register containing a destination memory address, and the stores one field specifies the register containing the data to be stored to memory. The immediate type machine language format for a store, pictured in Figure 2.6, is also similar to the immediate type format for a load, except that since the destination register is not needed, the destination is the immediate memory address. The destination field is zeroed out, while the source field specifies which register holds the data to be stored. Figure 2.6, machine language format for an immediate type store. The register relative store, on the other hand, uses the same immediate type instruction format used for the register relative load in Figure 2.5, but the destination field is set to a non-zero value, and the offset is stored in the second byte. Again, the base address for a register relative store can theoretically be stored in any register other than, and although by convention it's stored in D. Translating an example program into machine language. For a simple computer with 4 registers, 3 instructions and 256 memory cells, it's tedious but trivial to translate Program 1.1 into machine-readable binary representation using the previous tables and instruction formats. Programs 2.1 show the translation. Program 2.1, a translation of Program 1.1 into machine language. The ones and zeros in the rightmost column of Program 2.1 represent the high and low voltages that the computer thinks in. Real machine language instructions are usually longer and more complex than the simple ones I've given here, but the basic idea is exactly the same. Program instructions are translated into machine language in a mechanical, predefined manner, and even in the case of a fully modern microprocessor, doing such translation by hand is merely a matter of knowing the instruction formats and having access to the right charts and tables. Of course, for the most part, the only people who do such translation by hand are computer engineering or computer science undergraduates who've been assigned them for homework. This wasn't always the case though. The programming model in ISA. Back in the bad old days, programmers had to enter program into the computer directly in machine language after having walked 5 miles in the snow uphill to work. In the very early stages of computing, this was done by flipping switches. The programmer toggled strings of ones and zeros into the computer's very limited memory, ran the program, and then poured over the resulting strings of ones and zeros to decode the answer. Once memory sizes and processing power increased to the point where programming time and effort were valuable enough relative to computing time and memory space, computer scientists devised ways of allowing the computer to use a portion of its power and memory to take on some of the burden of making its cryptic input and output a little more human-friendly. In short, the tedious task of converting human-readable program into machine-readable binary code was automated, hence the birth of assembly language programming. Programs could now be written using mnemonics, register names, and memory locations before being converted by an assembler into machine language for processing. In order to write assembly language programs for a machine, you have to understand the machine's available resources, how many registers it has, what instruction it supports, and so on. In other words, you need a well-defined model of the machine you're trying to program. The programming model. The programming model is the programmer's interface to the microprocessor. It hides all the processor's complex implementation details behind a relatively simple, clean layer of abstraction that exposes to the programmer all of the processor's functionality. See Chapter 4 for more on history and development of the programming model. Figure 2.7 shows a diagram of a programming model for an 8-register machine. By now, most of the parts of the diagram should be familiar to you. The ALU performs arithmetic, the register store numbers, and the input-output unit, I/O unit, is responsible for interacting with memory and the rest of the system via loads and stores. The parts of the processor that we haven't yet met lie in the control unit. Of these, we'll cover the program counter and the instruction register now. The instruction register and the program counter. Because programs are stored in memory as ordered sequences of instructions and memory is arranged as a linear series of addresses, each instruction in a program lives at its own memory address. In order to step through and execute the lines of a program, the computer simply begins at the program starting address and then steps through each successive memory location, fetching each successive instruction from memory, placing it in a special register, and executing it as shown in Figure 2.8. Figure 2.8, a simple computer with instruction and data registers. Figure 2.7, the programming model for a simple 8-register machine. The instructions in our DLW1 computer are 2 bytes long. If we assume that each memory cell holds 1 byte, then the DLW1 must step through memory by fetching instructions from 2 cells at a time. For example, if the starting address in program 1.1 were 500, it would look like figure 2.9 in memory, with the instructions rendered in machine language, not assembly language, of course. Figure 2.9, an illustration of program 1.1 in memory starting at address number 500. The instruction fetch, loading the instruction register. An instruction fetch is a special type of load that happens automatically for every instruction. It always takes the address that's currently in the program counter register as its source and the instruction register as its destination. The control unit uses a fetch to load each instruction of a program from memory into the instruction register, where that instruction is decoded before being executed. And while that instruction is being decoded, the processor places the address of the next instruction into the program counter by incrementing the address that's currently in the program counter so that newly incremented address points to the next instruction in the sequence. In the case of our DLW1, the program counter is incremented by 2 every time an instruction is fetched, because the 2-byte instructions begin at every other byte in memory. Running a simple program, the fetch-execute loop. In Chapter 1, we discussed the steps a processor takes to perform calculations on numbers using the ALU, in combination with the fetch arithmetic instruction. Now let's look at the steps the processor takes in order to fetch a series of instructions, a program, and feed them to either the ALU in the case of arithmetic instructions, or the memory access hardware in the case of loads and stores. First, fetch the next instruction from the address stored in the program counter and load that instruction into the instruction register. Increment the program counter. Second, decode the instruction in the instruction register. Third, execute the instruction in the instruction register using the following rules. A. If the instruction is an arithmetic instruction, execute it using the ALU and register file. B. If the instruction is memory access instruction, execute it using the memory access hardware. These 3 steps are fairly straightforward, and with one modification, they describe the way that microprocessors execute program, as we'll see in the section branch instruction on page 30. Computer scientists often refer to these steps as fetch, execute, loop or the fetch execute cycle. The fetch execute loop is repeated for as long as the computer is powered on. The machine iterates through the entire loop from step 1 to step 3 over and over again, many millions or billions of times per second in order to run programs. Let's run through the 3 steps with our example program as shown in figure 2.9. This example presumes that number 500 is already in the program counter. Here's what processor does in order. First, fetch the instruction beginning at number 500 and load number 12, A into the instruction register. Increment the program counter to number 502. Second, decode load number 12, A in the instruction register. Third, execute load number 12, A from the instruction register using the memory access hardware. 4. Fetch the instruction beginning at number 502 and load number 13B in the instruction register. Increment the program counter to number 504. 5th, decode load number 13B in the instruction register. 6th, execute load number 13B from the instruction register using the memory access hardware. 7. Fetch instruction beginning at number 504 and add A, B, C into the instruction register. Increment the program counter to number 506. Decode add A, B, C in the instruction register. Execute A, B, C from the instruction register using the ALU and register file. 10. Fetch the instruction at 506 and load store C, number 14 in the instruction register. Increment the program counter to 508. 11. Decode store C, 14 in the instruction register. 12. Execute store C, 14 from the instruction register using the memory access hardware. Note, to zoom in on the execute steps of the preceding sequence, revisit Chapter 1 and particularly the sections refining the file clerk model on page 6 and RAM, when registers alone won't cut it on page 8. If you do, you'll gain a pretty good understanding of what's involved in executing a program on any machine. Sure, there are important machine-specific variations for most of what I've presented here, but the general outlines and even a decent number of the specifics are the same.